we have our superstar rock star, Christina Aldan.
Hi, I'm Christina Aldan. If you want to get in touch with me, I am Lucky Girly Girl on Twitter and Instagram. I do own my digital advertising agency. We heard from some great stories already today. We're going to hear from some more. Oh, I'm nervous. I don't get nervous. You know, we tell a lot of stories. These are some of my stories that I've told. Maybe these might resonate with some of you. I tell a lot of stories. Some of my stories are things like, I don't like computers. These are pictures of me. We taught, thousands of kids all around the Las Vegas Valley and Arizona about computers. Another story that I've told myself for a while is that I will never be a business owner. This is fuzzy, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it. But one of the stories that I told myself is that I will never be a business owner. But actually, I've owned several businesses. Another story I've told myself is that I'm not helpful. Guess what? I win awards for helpful. This is my story. I tell myself over and over again, and the evidence actually is contrary. I also say I'm horrible at politics. I don't do politics. Politics are not my thing. And yet I sat on the Lieutenant Governor's Board for Entrepreneurship, right, for his task force. I don't do politics, though, just so you guys know. And the biggest story that I've told is I am not a speaker. I travel the world. I've spoken in front of tens of thousands of people, probably. I talk about computers, tech, unconscious bias, diversity and inclusion, connection. These are some of the stories that I tell myself. I want to say thanks so much to Missy for allowing me to tell my story today, because this is a story that I don't tell. I don't do kids. I never wanted to be a kid. I never wanted to have kids. I never wanted to raise kids because I do not do kids. And this is going to rub some of you the wrong way because I teach your kids. I have mentored some of your kids. I have helped them get into college. I have taught them how to be entrepreneurs. But I don't do kids. It's a story I've been telling for a long time, and I knew it when I was 13 years old. I had a lot of evidence by the time I was 13 years old that I was not a kid person. I wasn't going to bring kids into a cruel and uncertain world because I don't do kids. I should have practiced. This is where I grew up. This is where I grew up with no plumbing and no water and an outhouse in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in a one-room, uninsulated, cold little shack. We lived at the end of a dirt road on a 40-acre farm. And, it's funny because people talk about trailer trash. People talk about, the Trump supporters, this, and there's people that are not educated and they're trailer trash and they're living in their double wide. And I'll tell you what, people, when we got our double wide, that was an upgrade for my family. I don't tell this story. And I don't do kids. my cow Bessie. When we sold her, I had a little bit of separation anxiety, but I moved on. Kids move on, they're resilient. But if you look at any of my pictures when I was younger, when I was a kid, and it's fuzzy, I'm sorry, I wasn't very happy. I like this one, it's kind of cute with my cousin. But there weren't a lot of smiles. There weren't a lot of smiles in my childhood. This was our 5th grade class. Everybody here rode the bus like 45 minutes to get to our 5th grade class. And I know that a lot of you, later when I grew up, people had multiple 5th grade classes, or, they had multiple rooms or teachers. This was all 19 of us were the 5th grade for like miles in the county. And you can kind of see, I am the diversity. So it wasn't easy being Asian in a teeny tiny community like that. I was the diverse person. I'm a professional speaker, trainer, and business owner. I travel the world. I drive a fancy Lexus now. And I don't tell this story. And what emotional intelligence tells us, because I speak a lot about emotional intelligence, I speak a lot about communication, about how we're connecting with other people at any given moment, and that authenticity. What emotional intelligence tells us is that our brains have this quality called neuroplasticity. And that means that you can teach an old dog new tricks. We didn't think you could do that before. Right? And so essentially, with repetition, or if the stimulus is strong enough, then you can create those new neural pathways. And the more you activate, the more you stimulate that nervous system, that connection, essentially the deeper the groove, right? Deeper the groove. So for example, and I speak a lot from experience, you'll find if you were to develop carpal tunnel, which, I spend a lot of time in front of my computer. I do own a digital advertising agency. So I spend a lot of time in front of my computer, and over again, that repetitive movement on your fingers, it damages the nerves over and over and over again. But, conversely, let's just say you're a toddler, and you're crawling around the floor, and you pick up a little bobby pin. I've totally done this, by the way. And you stick it in the wall socket. Whoo! All it's going to take is one time are you going to stimulate that neurological pathway and that connection, and guess what? You're not going to want to do that ever again. One time. I've done this once. If the stimulus is strong enough or repetitive enough, you can really, really cement that neural pathway and lock in that group. And she said, I am from Michigan. When I went to college, I spent a lot of my years making up for my daddy issues. I went to college and I was like, I'm free. I have now I'm independent. And what did I do? I just partied the whole time. It took me 7 years to graduate from college. And I changed my major how many times? I gave up an engineering scholarship. Called my mom one day and I was like, Mom, chemical engineering just isn't for me. And I know I got the scholarship and the whatever, but I want to go outside and play in the forest. I'm gonna be a rainforest girl. And I just completely changed my major and did a whole 180 drop. But she was supportive. She was very supportive. And there I was in Michigan, partying, not doing very well. And I had this teacher. Man, I had this teacher, because I'm really good at taking tests. When you are running a household at age 12 of 6 people, and you have to work and cook and clean and take care of your brother, take care of your sisters, because my parents were both working 2 jobs to get off of welfare for years. You've got to be good at taking tests, because there's no time for studying. And that came in helpful later, too, because, in college I was partying all the time. So I just cram, and then I take the test. But you can't skate through every class, because I'll tell you what, I had aerial photography. And in aerial photography, I just kept telling this story over and over again. I suck at aerial photography. That was my story. That's my story. I suck at aerial photography. Can't do maps. I hate the photos with the little trees. You did the 3D goggles. But what really was the problem with aerial photography was that you had to show up every single day because the content built on the next content. But who wants to show up to class at 8 a.m. when I've been partying until 6? Like, no, that doesn't work for my lifestyle. So I'm sorry, aerial photography. I just suck at aerial photography. That's what it is. But I'll tell you what, the professor, I needed that class. And she wasn't going to budge. She'd already flunked me twice. I needed that class, but I sucked at aerial photography. So one day I was at work, and there were these wonderful women. You know, I waitressed for a really long time, and they would come in for lunch. And they were retired, and once a month they'd just come in and do their little retired ladies' lunch, right? And it was awesome, and I was waiting on them one day, and one of the ladies looked up at me, and she said, "Oh, how are your classes, dear?" And I went into it. Oh, this professor. Everything's great except I might not graduate because aerial photography, I just suck at it. And the professor's a jerk and she won't let me do any extra credit. And she won't let me do, and I just can't pass it because I suck and it's all her fault. And I can't even believe. And she turned to me and she said, it's just perfect. I'll never forget it. It was this, she probably doesn't even remember. This perfect little bouffant, her gray hair. She turned to me and she said, "Oh, it's too bad you can't get over that, darling." And she just turned to me. She was done with me. But she wasn't done with me because it stuck in my head. Just get over it. Why do I have to just get over it when it's this professor's fault? Obviously, she's being unreasonable. This was the story that I told over and over again wherever I went. I told the story. Just get over it. And then finally I had to stop. Well, what would it take to just get over it? How do other people just get over it? And, why? And why do I have to get over it? She was like, actually, I had to think about it. This professor's not going to change. I need to get over it. What would have to happen for me to change that story? And I did. I changed the story. I showed up to class early, sat in the front row all the time. I informed the professor that I was going to do really well. I showed up to study groups. I led study groups. I just started changing the story. And I passed aerial photography. And that was one of the very first times that I ever had, because up until then, have you ever had that determination and you were just like, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to do whatever it takes, and you're just, some of you are not, I had no idea. I had none of that. I didn't know anything. At that point, I was 24 years old. I'd never really thought about, I'm just going to dig in, because up until then, my story was I'm a victim, and I'd learned that very well. And actually, in some ways I was. But I changed the story. And I thought, well, how else can I change the story? There are things that we can do, because what happens with our brain is we make up a belief, and this is just human nature. We make up a belief, and then we start finding evidence to support it. This is why we get in trouble with those Facebook fake news profiles and everybody, right? Because we have a belief, and we find evidence. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give my brain evidence that I do have the capacity to just get over it, that I do have the capacity to respect myself, that I do have the capacity to love myself, and I'm worth it. And I was at ground zero. And so you know where I started? Because I had no evidence of self-love anywhere around me at all. Where I started was with Skittles. With Skittles and with money. I would hide money, and I would hide Skittles for my future self. That's what I would do. And a week later, I'd come by and I'd go, ooh, look, Skittles, right? And I would go, look, wonderful, a gift from my past self to my future self. I have the capacity for self-love if I can give myself a gift. Now all I got to do is translate that into the big stuff, right? And so that's what I did. I started hiding Skittles. So I made it through my 20s. Got to my 30s, and my friends started having kids. They started having babies. And I'll never forget it. This one time, one of my girlfriends had just had a newborn. I remember, I don't do kids. One of my girlfriends just had a newborn. I walked in the door, we were chitty-chatting, and right away, within 5 minutes, her husband just starts handing me the baby, like push, whoa, 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 what's happening here, right? I was just talking to him, he's holding the baby, and now suddenly he just starts handing, no, no, dude, I don't do babies. Like, no, I came to see you guys. I hope you're okay. I hope she's recovering from the huge 9-pound, anyway. I'm just here to say hello, right? I don't touch that thing, right? I don't do babies. I even went so far as to found a group called the Vegas Non-Breeders Club. Some of y'all are members of this club in here, by the way. I love this one. So we post up memes. Because remember, what our brains do, people, is we have a belief and then we want evidence to prove it, right? And this is a belief in me that is so strong that I went outside of myself to gather up other people to help validate it for me in a private Facebook group where we mock parents. Anybody wants an invite, just let me know. There's some funny stuff in there. If you're easily offended, don't call me. You don't want to know. So you know it's coming, right? You know it's coming. You guys probably saw this because of how I told my story. But I have to tell you, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see this coming. Never, ever in a million, bazillion years, I didn't see this coming. I fell in love and I moved back to Michigan. Something I said I would never, ever, ever do in a million years because Michigan had so many triggers and so many memories of that old farm. And you know, being a little kid, the only Asian on the playground with bad hygiene and thrift store clothes and awkward movements, and you know, I never knew what to say. It was Michigan's fault. I was never going back to Michigan. So now I live in Michigan, and I got a couple of these. And it's crazy. It's totally wild to me. If I would have thought even a year ago that I'd be an Instamom, are you kidding me? That I'd be baking cakes and homemade pies from scratch and dinner every night and holidays. Oh my God, we didn't have holidays in my family, and if we did, it was yelling and screaming, and it would last, 48 hours, and the toys would get broken, and I don't do holidays. Like I don't do kids. And some of you might say, well, it's not those kids, or it's not just that man that changed things over, that you decided, there was something in you. But, at the end of the day, when I have to think about it, and I pause, and I think, what else is mentorship but, parenting? What else is teaching computers and showing kids how to be active community citizens than nurturing? Even when I couldn't do it for myself, I was doing it for my community already. I was already preparing, and when somebody came up with the instant family, all I did was just kind of open the door. It was right there. So, I wanted to share some ways with you today. If you look at my story about how you can change your story, I think I've kind of shown that today. You can change your story, and you can just get over it. So these are some ways that you can change your story. Get in touch with your inner child. When I started on personal development, I'll tell you what, I talked to gurus, I talked to color therapists and light therapists and acupuncturists and regular therapists and anybody under the sun, and every single one of them told me, same thing, get in touch with your inner child. And I was like, screw my inner child. What does that even look like? Because it's vague. And it means something different for everybody. And some people, they'll sing, and some people they'll write, and some people they'll try to meditate, and they'll hire professionals. And I did all of them for decades until actually one day I was like, oh, there you are. Because for years, anytime I'd get in touch with my inner child, I'd be like, quit your crying or I'll give you something to cry about, because that's what I know. I was in there. It was so deep in there. But guess what? I've changed that story. Get in touch with your inner child. Fail fast. I'll tell you what, 7 years. 7 years I graduated college, in 7 years I filed bankruptcy. By the time I was 27, I have, divorced. I have so many things. I move, I blow everything up, and then move again, and then blow everything up, and then move again. If you fail fast and you just get it over with, then there's only one way to go but up, right? Hide candy like you're a squirrel. This really works, actually. This is really, really good. If you're looking for some self-love, if you're looking to change your story, hiding candy like a squirrel is a really fantastic way to do it. Move to Michigan in the middle of the winter. That's another way. If you want to change your story, you want to figure that out, find happiness, move to Michigan in the middle of winter. And now, become an Instamom. I go to the zoo, I color. Oh my God, I was the worst zoo hater for forever. And now I go to the zoo like every few weeks. It's ridiculous. And celebrate holidays. We do holidays. Like I celebrated my birthday, and I don't do cake, so we did donuts this year. But I celebrate holidays now. It's so foreign to me. It's awkward. Expand your vocabulary. Now I say things like, take that out of your underwear, I regularly. If you want to change your story, change your vocabulary. I say things like, here's your other hippo ball. Like, is that even English? But I love it. It's fantastic. And I've totally changed my story. And at the end of the day, you don't have to do all of those things. The only thing you really have to do is tell yourself the truth in the kindest way possible. Thank you, Nancy Gabriel. Because when you can forgive yourself for all the crazy stuff you did in your 20s, and the failures, and the lost house, and the thousands of dollars, and the failed marriage, when you can forgive other people, that's when it comes. That's when you really know you're at the foundation of your pain, the nitty-gritty, and that is the only way you can change your story, is understanding that why. So what are your stories? I've got a story about addiction and drugs. I've got a story about living in an orphanage in Peru for 3 months. I've got a story about meeting the Dalai Lama. I've got stories, thousands of stories. And whoever I'm talking to, that story might change. So what are your stories? Some people, they will cast themselves as the hero, the victim. Maybe you're just a supporting role. That's cool too, but whatever it is. The only important thing you need to do is ask about, what story are you telling yourself? What story are you telling others? And how does it change depending on the person in front of you? Because after all, I don't suck at aerial photography, as it turns out. And I don't suck at being a mom either, much to my surprise. Everybody else was totally on board with it, like, oh, I'm sure you'd be a great mom. And I was like, okay, what happened? Did the whole world go crazy? Isn't anyone else freaking out here that I'm a mom? And they're like, no, you got this, girl, you're good. Experiences are the sum total of who we are, but not of what we can become. I live by this. I use this in almost every single talk that I give. I'm on a plane probably every week or every other week. I use this quote because I live by it, and it has helped me with that forgiveness, and it has helped me change my story. And when the door opened, it was right in front of me. All I had to do was just walk right in. As my late friend Dale Krause says, live a great story. Thank you.